Bret Oldham es un famoso abducido e investigador paranormal norteamericano. Es conocido por sus experiencias de abducción extraterrestre, su trabajo con otros abducidos, psicofonías y el trabajo e investigación con la llamada caja de los espíritus, o como se le conoce en inglés, Spirit Box. Bret es el autor del aclamado bestseller de Amazon, Children of the Grace, en el que detalla sus experiencias de abducción extraterrestre, y su último libro, The Baby Takers. Ha realizado varias apariciones en televisión nacional en los Estados Unidos y muchos otros países. Ha aparecido en numerosos programas de radio y televisión por internet y ha sido entrevistado por varias revistas y periódicos en línea. Bret ha contribuido en capítulos de varios otros libros, incluidos libros del autor de renombre mundial Brad Steiger, entre otros. También ha escrito artículos para las revistas Alternate Perceptions y Mysterious Universe. Ha sido orador invitado para varias conferencias de MUFON a lo largo de los Estados Unidos. A continuación, nuestra entrevista a Bret Oldham. Espero que la disfruten.
Good evening to everyone. Here from Tennessee and from Puerto Rico, we have invited to our channel Mr. Bret Oldham, which I count as a friend. I have known him for several years now. Very good friend. And Bret Oldham is an experiencer. When we talk about an experiencer, we talk about somebody that have had contact with aliens, have been adopted, or have been in a certain way in a deep contact with alien entities. And Bret has a real good story to tell you. Everything that he's going to tell you has been proven to be true. And we will know a little bit about something that was done to him not too long ago that proves that everything that he has said about this is true. And he has written a couple of books, 2 books. One of the books is named Children of the Grace. The other book is The Baby Takers. You can find these books in Amazon if you want to purchase them. And the first book was endorsed by Sandy Nichols. Sandy Nichols is a person that had a group of abductees that he used to help. I believe that he doesn't have the group anymore, but for many years he had a group of people that he was helping with the problems related to abductions. Also by Brent Ryans that we had in our channel not too long ago, that has the Alternate magazine. Brad Steiger, that he already passed, but he was known all over the United States and internationally as a UFO investigator of very high level. Kathleen Marden, which Kathleen Marden is the well, she was related or is related to Betty and Barney Hill. Betty and Barney were their uncle and their aunt and her aunt. And she is also the head of the Experiencer program in the free organization, and also has a similar program with MUFON. Also endorsed, his book was endorsed by Leo Sprinkle. Leo Sprinkle is a PhD, a doctor in psychology, and has been over 50 years in the field of ufology. He's in his 80s right now. So those are mainly the contributors and the endorsers of his book. Also, I would like to say that besides being an experiencer, Bret is a researcher and an investigator of paranormal phenomena. I don't know if he still have a group, but he used to have a group that used to do investigations. He has been in radio interviews, TV shows, magazines, newspapers all over the United States and internationally. Places internationally that he's been interviewed: New Zealand, Europe. He's been in the Discovery Channel in different shows. He also has been in CBC with Canada, TV7 in Bulgaria, And also he has been in 4 different times with the chapters of Asian aliens, and as far as I know, he just filmed one more chapter that's going to be aired in August. So if you're watching tonight, be watching Asian aliens, and it's going to be about abductees, and most part of the show is going to be with Bret Oldham. He also, at the beginning of his experiences, had contact and have to consider a friend of his, John Lear. And you know that John Lear had to do with Bob Lazar and etc. etc. He's been involved with the UFO phenomena for a long time. So we're talking about one of the few people that is brave enough to talk about his experiences, to open up and tell us what is going on, and to be completely clear, transparent. He's not hiding anything. Tonight we're mostly going to talk about something that happened to him in 1988, even though that his experiences started when he was a kid. So I pass it now to Pablo, so we can start talking to Bret.
Bret, I would like to ask you about, tell us about your experience and how it all started with you.
It started when I was a child. I was 5 years old, living out in the country on a farm in southern Illinois, and that was when there was actually a UFO flap in that area. A lot of farmers were seeing stuff over that summer, and it was in the fall when my first experience happened. And I had basically woke up in the middle of the night. I heard what I thought was my stepdad talking to me, and there was a bright light coming through one of the windows, which we lived out on a gravel road. There was no street lights or anything like that. And I just got up, innocent little child, walked toward the window. I didn't go to the window where the light was coming in, but I went to the adjacent window and just took my right hand and pulled back these little thin curtains that we had, and came face to face on the other side of the window with what we typically know as a small gray standing 1.5 feet in front of me. And I saw 2 other ones out a little bit further out, maybe 12, 15 feet out. And before I could scream, react, or anything, because I had never been exposed to anything like that. I had no idea even how to process it as to what it was, but I was instantly gone. And next thing I know, I was on a table and being surrounded by these creatures that I didn't know, what they were. And that was pretty much the beginning.
Hector, go ahead.
Yes, I read your book, and based on what you say, it has been all your life. It's still happening today.
It's still happening. It's never stopped. I mean, I've actually come up with a term I call lifers, because it's sort of like being a life sentence in a way, because I think if you happen to have the certain genetics, especially with the grays, that appeals to them, and they're going to keep coming back, and they're going to take you as many times as they need to for whatever serves them on their agenda. And so it's not something that happens on a frequent basis. It can go in spurts, and then you can have even like a year and a half with nothing happening. It's completely unpredictable, but it's slowed down as I've gotten older, and that's about the only change, but I realized a long time ago that it's not going to stop. I did everything when I was younger. I did everything I could to try to make it stop. And then I finally just accepted that I couldn't stop it. And so I just went along with whatever happened to me and just prayed that I would be taken back.
Yes. In your book, Children of the Grave, I would like to ask you specifically if you can tell us in detail, the best that you can, the experience that you had in 1988 with your ex-girlfriend, Denise.
Yeah, that was one of the
what happened that year.
That was one of the most traumatic experiences I think that I went through. And basically what happened, I was living in Las Vegas, and I had a series of events, but I wasn't telling anybody about them at that time. And I started having recurring nosebleeds and everything, and I was remembering bits and pieces, and I was getting a little concerned. And we were living together at the time, and she had gotten pregnant, which was mysterious within itself because we were practicing birth control, but it happened, and she was having a regular pregnancy, was 1 week shy of her first trimester when this incident happened, and she had just been to the OBGYN the week prior to that. Everything was going great, and in the middle of the night, I hear a loud thud sound, and it woke us both up, and she remembered seeing 4 grays. I saw 5 because one of them was standing back behind where the master bath was at, and it her view was kind of blocked from her side of the bed to that. And they were surrounded us, and they ended up taking both of us at the same time, and they put me on a table, like these platform type things that they put you on, about 10 or 12 feet away from, and she was to my right, and they had her up against, there was a lot of equipment over on this wall by where she was at. And all of my experience up to that time, I had never seen so many grays. There was the small grays, who I believe are basically biological robots. I think they're made as workers. I don't think that they're the actual alien per se. The tall grays are clearly in charge, and there was a tall gray. They had a tall gray standing at the bottom of her platform, and they had her legs up and like this, very similar to what we do, like when a woman's giving birth, and these stirrup type things. And they had left the opening on her left side. None of them were standing around her on that side, and they were completely surrounding me on my left side, and they left the opening on my right, and I was unable to move anything except my head. And I remember like looking over to my right. I had a clear view of what was going on, and she was screaming, "Please don't take my baby! Stop! Why are you doing this? Who are you?" She was very confused. I knew exactly what was happening, and I was really, really angry, and I was swearing at them and threatening to kill them and telling them that if I could break free of this mind control power, that I would take them all out. Of course, I was completely useless and helpless to do that. And they took the fetus. And the next thing I remember is we woke up, and it was a nice sunny day in Las Vegas. And she got up to go to the bathroom, and she noticed a little bit of blood on the sheets. And when she called out from the master bath, she says, "You better call my doctor. I'm bleeding." And so I called the doctor, and he says, "You better come in right away." And so we rushed up there, and he says, "I think you've had a miscarriage." And she says, "That's impossible because no tissue came out." It was, I was paying very close attention. So he said, "Well, there's no fetus there. I'm pretty sure I need to go in and do this procedure called a D&C, where they scrape the womb." So we went across the street to Women's Hospital in Las Vegas, and which is no longer there, but it was there at the time. And I called her mom and my mom, told them what happened. And all this time, I'm remembering exactly what happened. Like, they didn't try to suppress the memories. And then I saw the doctor come out, coming walking down the hall, and I thought something happened. And I got up to meet him, and I said, "Hey, is everything okay?" And he goes, No, she's fine." He goes, "But this is like the craziest thing I've ever seen." He says, "I went in to clean the womb, and it was already cleaned. And if I hadn't just seen this woman a week ago, I would have thought she was never pregnant." And I remember my mother had walked up behind me, and I turned around, and just sort of out of a reaction, I said, "They took it." Of course, she didn't know what I was talking about, and I was completely drained. And then later that day, like, I didn't want to bring it up to her, like when they released her from the hospital. And so I didn't say anything, and we just had this long silent ride home. But eventually we talked about it, and I found out that they had let her remember everything also. And years later, like, she ended up doing a couple television shows with me. We interviewed completely separate. One of them was on Destination America, the first one. And when the producer people came back, and I said, well, how did it go? And they said, wow, she was really traumatized by this event, and she backs up your story like 100%, almost verbatim. She remembered it just like you explained it. And so you have a case where two people were taken at the same time, and to this day still remember exactly the same thing. And that was one of the most emotional things. I remember I got regressed. I was being filmed for a pilot show that never got off from Prometheus Productions, the people that do Ancient Aliens. And they had all these cameras on me and everything. It was the first time I've ever been regressed by a therapist. I ended up in therapy, which we go into a lot of the stuff in the book, but because of these incidents. But even then I didn't tell my therapist what happened. So I'd never been regressed. And I met her name's Dr. Judy Bloom. She's in Los Angeles, very respected therapist. And I remember telling her, if you're going to do the regression, don't lead me. You know, that was the rap sort of on Bud Hopkins sometimes, but that's what a lot of skeptics will say. Well, when people get regressed, they're getting these loaded questions and they're leading them. And so I before we went to shoot, you know, I met with her and I said, don't ask any questions that's going to be people who are going to misconstrue as being guided questions. And then she says, well, how deep do you want to go? And I didn't know I didn't even know anything about it. And I said, I didn't know there was different levels. And I says, well, the deepest, you know, whatever it is. And she said, well, sometimes that can be pretty traumatic. And I was like, look, if I recommend regression to people that contact me, I have to be willing to step up and do the same thing. And I said, so unless you think I'm about to have a heart attack from fear or something to that effect, don't bring me out of it, because, you know, even though I have a lot of answers, I don't have all the answers. No one does. And so I'm still searching, you know, to fill in some of the blanks. And so I figured, well, first I didn't even think I was going to work, because I had all this crew in there, you know, during this kind of, it just didn't seem like the right kind of appropriate circumstances to do this. But I did go under, and eventually I sort of just like forgot that it was being filmed and everything like that. And one of the things that came up, which is not surprising, was the incident that you asked about with the fetus being taken. And I didn't realize at the time, but when they were filming, I guess I was actually, like, tears were rolling down. I was reliving it again. And I ended up seeing more of it under regression. And I saw the tall gray, like, leave with this sort of like tray and had the fetus in there on something. And a small gray went out of the room with him, and then she went silent, like she went into shock. And I didn't consciously remember any of that until I went under regression. But I also remember, like, during that incident, apologizing to her because I felt responsible. And so I carried that guilt for all these years, feeling responsible for putting her through that. And it was a very healing process to when I did come out of the hypnosis. I felt a really like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, because I realized at that time that it was nothing that I could have done. Like, you know, I never asked for any of this to happen to me ever. And these beings are so powerful with mind control that, and I tell people, and if your listeners are having these experiences, I want them to know, you know, there's a lot of sexual stuff, experiments that go on and things like that. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And because we have no control over this, and you're not alone in this, and people that this happens to, as you well know, Hector, you know, it's things that you have no control over. These beings, you know, we are not the supreme beings of the universe, you know, and they have this mind control that's indescribable, and there's no way you can break it, and they can force you to do anything you want. And so when you're subjected to these kind of things, you know, what that was about was they took me to see it because the Greys are creating these hybrids. That's one thing I will say for sure on the agenda that I know. And they're exhibiting human emotions because they're genetically part us. And the Greys, they're pretty emotionless. And I think they're having a hard time understanding the human psyche. And so they run a lot of experiments on the abductees that has to do with eliciting certain emotions in order to kind of see what makes us tick, you know, in simple terms. And I think they took me and made me witness that because they wanted to see what kind of emotional reaction I was going to have with that, and they got it.
Let me ask you another question. I know that in the book you talk that later on they presented you with what you believe to be that fetus, maybe, and maybe your daughter as a hybrid. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was something that that was another thing that made quite an impact on me. Somewhere between 2 and 3 years later, I remembered an incident that I was escorted by 2 small grays into this area of a craft. And the reason I say craft, because I've been in places that are, I believe, are earthbound facilities, and there's a definite difference, but we don't have time to go into it. But and on the crafts, a lot of things are round, like they have rounded edges, and on the grays, they actually prefer ramps. They don't like stairs. And their lighting is also very different. In fact, they actually have the capabilities to control light. And they took me into this room, and it just had these small little round lights, just sort of light, ambient lights, just enough to see by. And there was no telepathic communication. They just basically told me to wait. And I could see this ramp down that went into another room, and I could see this opening, and it was a very bright light, but the light was not filtering into the room that I was in. And I remember being fascinated by that, but I was also like very nervous because it was very dimly lit where I was at, and that's not the case on these crafts. And so I didn't know like what was about to happen. And then I saw this figure break through the light, and as it did, the light filtered into the room that I was in, and it didn't get completely bright, but it made it lighter than it was. And this figure started walking up this ramp toward me, and I could see that it was a adult female hybrid, and she was carrying a child. And she walked up to me and she set this child down, and it looked to be about that age, 2 to 3 years old in human years. And she told me that it was my child and she wanted me to interact with it. And I refused. And, I used to be kind of rebellious on some of this stuff because of the anger of what was happening to me. And I was like, no, I'm not going to, even though of course they could make you do it, but I think they wanted you to do it on your own free will. And then I looked at the child, and she didn't seem afraid, but she seemed very curious about me. And she looked up, and she's actually on the cover of Children of the Greys. My brother Bret Oldham is an artist, and a great artist, and did a wonderful depiction of her. And I just looked into her. She was unusual looking, but she certainly wasn't hideous at all. And there was just something mesmerizing about her, especially in her eyes. And she had large eyes, but they were sort of this blue-gray, very piercing. But also she had sort of a softness about her. And I just knelt down and started interacting with her as you would like a human child. And I didn't really have any communication except that she seemed to enjoy that. And this only went on for a few minutes, and then the adult hybrid took her and just walked away without any communication, without telling me anything. And I was like, wait, stop. I wanted to see her longer. I sort of felt a maternal bond actually in a very short amount of time. And I said, I don't even know her name. What's your name? And I got nothing. And so for years that bothered me. And I knew if I ever came out, had enough nerve, and it took me 20 some years to do it, to go public with my story, that I knew that what the title was going to be of the first book, and I knew that she was going to be on the cover. And I always wondered what happened to her, if she was really my daughter, or what do they use her for, what she looked like now, all those kind of questions that go through your mind. And I always kind of resented that they never showed her to me again, or I never got to meet her again. And not too many people know this, but I think, of course, we're implanted, and they can monitor our thoughts at any given time that they choose. So I think they've known this over the years, and they seem to do something nice for me. And about a year and a half ago, I had an event. I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I remember enough of it that matters. And I was sitting on one of those platform table things. Maybe it was after an examination or something. I don't really remember, but I remember sitting there, and I could see down in this hallway, and this adult hybrid came in, and she started talking to me, and it was her. And I don't remember a lot of what was said, but I do remember that I asked her, one of the things I wanted to know was her name. And I found out that she was fine. And she telepathically told me, she said, as you would understand it. And then she put the letters, like an image of letters, and she just put RHY. And I said, Rye? And she just nodded her head. That it was, I guess it was something maybe a little more complicated than that, but, to simplify it, or something that we would sort of understand in my language. And, I felt a sense of peace after that as well, So in the last few years, I've had a lot of things change and been able to heal quite a bit.
Bret, have you asked yourself, why me? Why are people selected for this kind of healing hybrid program?
Oh yeah, I did that for years, and then it just became sort of a moot point, because you're never really going to find that out. It's subjective, because everybody's got a different idea of that, but I do think logically thinking, it's got to do something with genetics. And that, research shows that it goes in family lines. My family, they talked about my great grandfather having some strange experiences and things like, he, like myself, like I've been ridiculously healthy, like my whole entire life. And I think I really attribute that to them. They've kept me that way because they use me, and it's to their benefit, but it's also to my benefit. And then, he had, he had psychic abilities. People used to hire him as what they used to call a water witch, when they had to dig wells and stuff, for him, and he would find where the water was and things like that. And so, and my mother had experience where she had remembered like one thing of being taken and put in this like strange looking chair, and it was all this computer type equipment and screens, which was way before any of that stuff was ever invented. So I suspect that it's probably been going on in my family for a few generations, and they're probably just trying to, they like that particular line of genetics, and they try to keep the lines as pure as possible.
Okay. I'd like to ask you about, I think it's pretty much related to your work. Have you been approached by government people regarding your experience and your work, your books?
Actually, I have, and it was a positive experience. So it was. I write about it pretty in more detail, and we're kind of limited on time. But in the Baby Takers, I talk about that. But it happened in Boulder City. It's a city maybe 30 minutes out of Las Vegas on the way to Hoover Dam, and there's a store there called Area 52. And of course, when I went to visit, I'm going to go to Area 52 store, and these two guys come in and kind of scouting the place out, and I was just standing there looking at books, and then when everybody that was in there, this one guy came in actually first, and he was in a suit and looked kind of out of place, because this is sort of downtown. This is a older town, and they have like this touristy area, and so most people are pretty casually dressed. And then he went over to the cashier and leaned over and was whispering something to her, and she went into the back and just left the store, the cash wrap unattended. And then he just stood in the back of the store, and he just turned around and like faced where he can see the whole entire store. It's not a real big place, and the front door. And then I'm just kind of like, what's going on here? I'm thinking maybe the place is about to be robbed or something. And this older guy comes in, and he is dressed casual. And he walks in, and I'm standing maybe 7 feet from the front door at this point. And he just like walks up right beside me and stops. And they have a large like this mannequin statue thing of a tall gray over in the corner, like a prop type deal. And he just says, hey, do you believe in those things? And he's just sort of looking for a way to open up the conversation. And I kind of chuckled, and I'm like, yeah. And then he just kind of went from there and sort of breaking the ice. And we just kept talking. And then he eventually told me that he knew who I was. And he was familiar with the work, what I was doing and what I was saying in the public. And so I started getting kind of nervous. And he told me a lot of stuff about these blackout projects and things that he had experienced and how he got involved with it from a soldier, and then, all the way down to time travel experiments and things that the government was doing. I even asked him if the Philadelphia experiment was real, and he kind of laughed. And he says, well, sort of, but not like the movies or the TV show, and he says, and don't think it's still not going on. So we just sort of had like that. And I was like, I can't, why is this guy telling me all this stuff? But in the end, the other guy come up to him and called him by name. And I wish I would have been paying more attention, because I was sort of blown away by it. I was really taken back. It was totally unexpected. And he just says, well, we just want you to know that we appreciate what you're doing and keep up the good work. And they walked out. And then soon after that, the cashier lady came out. And then I was walking down the sidewalk, because I just stood there for a few minutes and like, wow, this was all, they've been following me, and they made sure no one else was in there. They even made the cashier go back in the back so that she wouldn't hear this stuff. And then I heard a horn beep, and I started walking back to my car, and there was a van that came by and had windows in it. And there was a driver, third person driving. And then the guy in the suit was in the passenger, and the older guy was sitting in the seat right behind, and they actually honked at me and waved. And so I kind of took that as a reassurance that, I don't think it, I believe that people like me are disclosure, and then I'm doing these black, I don't think this is actual government per se. These are the black op people. And because I even asked that guy, I said, well, why did I said, you can't be still doing this, and he said, no, I'm retired. He goes, but they felt that you would be more comfortable talking to me because of my age. And so that's why he dressed casual, and he's an older guy, and he was just kind of breaking the ice, that type of thing like that.
Yeah, talking about disclosure, have you thought to formally complain to the government about the abduction program? Have you thought of that? Not really. I don't think it would do any good, because this thing goes so deep. And the thing is, I don't think, and nothing against Steve Bassett, and the people that's trying to do disclosure, and I completely appreciate and understand what they're doing and why they're trying to do it. I just don't think that all of a sudden that the government is going to admit, like, we've been lying to you guys all this time, and then we know they've been taking people. And not only that, we're doing it too, because I'm sure that they've taken me as well, because they want to know, they want to go inside my head and find out, like, but see, what I've done is I put it all out there to begin with. And I don't blame them for hiding this stuff, because I don't think we're ready for it yet, and it takes people like me to slowly acclimate the public, because
you know, I've got one of the strongest cases out there. I've been taken with another person who has put their testimony out there, backed up exactly what I've said. I've taken a lie detector test with a former Secret Service guy named Joseph Paolo, who was on President Kennedy's Secret Service. He's out of Los Angeles, one of the most respected polygraph examiners that there is, and passed. Recently, I did a brain scan with a Dr. Nardio in Los Angeles. They're going to show this on the next episode of Ancient Aliens. I don't want to talk about too much, but it showed on the brain scan, and to my knowledge, I don't know of any other abductee that's ever went this far with this to prove the truth, but it showed the area of my brain lighting up from these, the way it's hard to explain scientifically, but they put these electrodes all over your head on the software, showing that the section of your brain that contains memories and not your imagination, not where you're just making something up, that was what was engaging when I was talking about my experiences. That couldn't happen if somebody was making this up, you know. So I think, you know, with that kind of, and I've offered a lot of physical proof as well. You know, I put up pictures of scars and all kinds of mysterious marks and stuff that I wake up with out there. You know, I've taken special blood tests to try to find out where these scars came from. You know, I've showed them to at least a half a dozen doctors who can't explain them, on and on and on. So it's when I think basically they appreciate what I'm doing because I have this kind of proof, and I'm out there trying to do this on a worldwide basis to let people know that this is happening. So there'll be this slow acceptance of it, because right now, I don't think man's ego can handle the fact that we can't really defend ourselves against these guys. And I don't think it's just the Greys that are here. I think there's more than them. I don't think they're going to just destroy us because they would have did that a long time ago. But and then of course you got the whole religious stuff. You know, that could cause quite an upheaval when you bring in another species who may or may not agree with some of our religious beliefs here. I really think that's a huge problem.
Let me ask you something. What do you think that happened to your child? You know, she might be an adult now. She's still out there. Is she on Earth? Have you seen any one of these hybrids on Earth?
I haven't seen anybody that, you know, I could definitely say is a hybrid, although it would not surprise me. I think their program's gotten to the point, like she could almost pass. You know, that they're getting closer and closer. And what better way to monitor us other than to integrate this into society, these hybrids, and use them to do it. And so it would not surprise me. And I talked to, you know, the late great Brad Steiger about that, and he thought that too, you know, that they probably have reached that point where they are integrating into our society, maybe on just a low level, but still doing that. And I think she's, from what I gathered from the meeting, that she is a part of something on the craft. You know, she's doing something on that nature. I don't think that she's, and we don't know. They could, you know, where they're actually from, because that's another thing. I mean, these guys, they could be interdimensional. They could be ultra-terrestrial instead of extra, you know, and because they are using dimensional portals, no doubt about it, taking us. And so, you know, they could be from a planet in another dimension. I mean, it just gets so complex, you know, to know exactly everything that's going on. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if they haven't already integrated into society.
You mentioned some facilities that you've been on Earth, not when you were on the craft. Were these military facilities from? One
of them I for sure believe was, and there was another one which was an undersea facility that I believe was 100% alien. It was remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And but there was one that I had an incident where I actually recognized somebody that I knew, that they had been taken. And a lot of times when I've seen other humans, They're in this sort of like what I don't even know how to describe it other than saying it's sort of a zombie-like state. Like they're conscious, but they seem unaware of their surroundings. And I've probably been like that as well. Or maybe, you know, they perceive me in the same state. And, you know, maybe that's the way I appear to them as well. But yeah, because I saw humans, and two of the guys were actually human clones who I've seen before. The guys look, you know, they're complete twins. And they were escorting this woman, and the humans that were there were tagged. Like everyone was nude. They had us, everybody stripped down, and they had these little black tags on our groin areas. And I think that was the way they were marking us. And the lighting was completely different. Everything about it was different. It looked almost like a doctor's office, you know, with the counters and stuff like that. It had the sharp edges. So I'm positive that was not a craft.
So will you consider your experience and the experiences of people that have been through this good or bad experiences?
Well, it depends. It's all a matter of how you look at it. For years, I thought it was all bad because you're subjected to all kinds of physical stuff. You know, I've got scars on my body that I still don't remember, and that's probably my subconscious mind protecting me because it was such a traumatic experience that I don't want to live it again. I talked to Travis Walton about this because, you know, we were talking about, you know, how much you remember, and because he doesn't really remember that much actually, but he said when he got regressed that he became really agitated and fearful, and they brought him out of it, and they just told him like, look, this is too much for you to handle. You're better off not going there because it might affect your health. And so I can kind of relate to that because, you know, the things that you remember, and they're bad. I think some of the emotional things are probably worse, you know, because they do these experiments, you know, these mind control things and create certain scenes. And then of course the sexual stuff, you know, you do feel, it is sort of like sexual abuse. I mean, you do feel raped, you know, even as a man. And so all that stuff is bad. But on the flip side of it, and what I've learned to do, and what I try to teach people that's had these experiences, is the number one thing is you cannot become a victim to this. And so you have to empower yourself in our existence, because you never know from day to day. Like, you know, people that have these experiences, we go to bed at night, we don't know, this could be a night they're taking, you know, you have to start blocking that out of your mind. And in a sense, you sort of live a double life, because you try to live a normal life, but like personally, I don't really know what normal is, you know, but I do my best to try to adapt to what I consider to be a normal life like everybody else. But I always have this in the back of my mind of these experiences. And then, you know, you do end up with like these psychic abilities. And so I tell people like, look, use those, you know, like that's how I got into paranormal research. Like I have an ability to communicate with the other side. And so I've used that, and I'm clairaudient. I can go on investigations. I hear them talking, and you know, years ago they would have locked you up for this stuff. But now we have technology that when I said, hey, somebody just said to get out, you know, I can pull back on my digital recorder and play it for everybody else. And even sort of some mediumship things that I've used. And I use it to help people, as Hector knows. And so I derive positive things from these experiences, like just like I was talking about earlier, my health. Hey, you know, I went through all these things, but man, I've lived a blessed life with my health, and it's because of those experiences. And I think it's made me a more spiritual person and a more altruistic person. Like, you know, I care about everybody on this planet and the planet itself and all the animals. I'm a huge animal advocate and things like that. So it turns you into this, I actually think what happens and what's happening to a lot of us right now is this elevation of consciousness. And there's a certain group of us, and I think a lot of people I've met so many wonderful experiencers, really great people, and they're all kind of in the same line, you know, like of of everything I was just talking about. And so that's all positive stuff, you know. So if it turned me into the person that I am now, then I'm glad it happened, you know. And it took me a long time to be able to say that.
So do you agree with the numbers that came out from Free?
10 million?
No. Free came out that 90% of the abductees had good experiences.
No, I think that's highly exaggerated, because I've talked to people from all over the world, and that's not the case at all. And the problem with that kind of thing, it goes back to the mind control thing, because, you know, if they make you think that you're having a good experience, then when you do remember it, then that's what that you have. You know, they use screen memories on a lot of people, making them, oh, I saw a giant owl in my room, or I saw this deer outside the window with really big eyes. You know, they pull stuff from your subconscious and they use it to their advantage. You know, the grays are definitely deceitful. You know, that's a fact. But at the same time, you got to consider that these are not, they're not mankind. They're not Homo sapiens. So they're not wired the way we are. You know, just because we believe a certain way or we are a certain way doesn't mean that every other being in the universe is like that. And that's you know, we have trouble on this planet accepting our own differences, as even though we're just all human beings. And so that's the problem with people trying to rationalize why an alien species is going to do one thing or another. And so I try to look at it like that too. It's like, look, they've did all this stuff, but at the same time, you know, maybe they had to, you know, maybe they're a dying race. This is why they're creating these hybrids. They're just trying to survive. And, you know, they haven't wiped out our planet. This is happening on a grand scale, that's for sure. Maybe they're trying to re-inhabit a whole nother planet. You know, that's why they need so many. It's all speculative, but it does kind of make sense if you look at it like that. Like, hey, they don't have the emotion that we do, so they're not, when they do something to me, they're not feeling remorse because they're incapable of feeling remorse. So, you know, and if I look at it like that, it's a little easier to try to deal with it.
Besides grays, have you had any kind of experience with other entities or, you know, beings?
Just the hybrids. I was presented with and I wrote about this in Baby Takers. It was, I pride myself, even in my paranormal work, and also with these experiences of living a life of no fear, because I'm like, everything that's happened to me, what do I have to be afraid of at this point in life? And there was a time where I sort of succumbed to fear again, and it was another one of these like mind experiments where I was just being escorted, and all of a sudden they walk away, and the whole entire like ship disappeared in my mind, and I was like sort of up in the clouds, and I was off balance, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And of course they pulled this stuff from my mind, and I saw this old house, you know, the small little shack kind of a house up ahead. And so I just walked up to it, and it didn't have a door, but had to step up into it. And I knew, because they did this kind of stuff to me before, and I just like, oh, none of this is real. I'll just play along, get it over with. I don't know what they're going to do, but, you know, let's just get this over with. And I step in, and there's this wooden floor, and there's a guy, a human, who I perceive to be human, in the middle of the floor, on this chair. And he's really frightened, and he's telling me like, oh, come in, hurry up, they're coming. And then I happen to notice to my left that there's this long, like sort of like tub vat type thing, which they couldn't have pulled that from my mind because I'd never seen anything like that before. And there was it was maybe 8 or 9 feet long and maybe 5 feet wide and maybe 3 feet deep. And there was a lady, it was back in the corner, and she was in it, and she was in the fetal position at the far end of it and just sobbing uncontrollably. And I was really confused, and I was like, well, I don't understand what's happening here. And this guy, I could tell that he was trying to get me fearful, afraid. And so I said, well, who's coming? And he says, you know who they are. And he wouldn't answer me. And then he gets up and he gets in this vat thing, and he goes down to the other end, and he's sitting down in a fetal position beside this woman. And they're both really agitated. And then I hear something coming. And so he keeps telling me, get over here with us, get over here with us. And so I do. I was like, oh, okay, I'll play along. So I stayed at the other end. I didn't go down where they were. And then I see this thing walk in, and I only call it a thing because I could only describe it as a mix between a human, a gray, and a reptilian. And I'd never seen anything like this before. Like, they showed me one time this baby that was pretty hideous, that looked like some kind of genetic mistake. And I really felt very bad for it. But I'd never seen anything like this, and I was afraid of it. I mean, it was muscular, and it had like sort of almost a reptilian like breastplate. It was chalky skin looking. It had the same color of eyes as the hybrid girl that I mentioned earlier, but it did have some human features as well, and it was completely hairless, and but it was very defined, like, you know, almost like athletic, muscular. And another thing that I noticed, that it was completely nude, and it had genitalia very similar to male, except that its testicles were grossly enlarged. And I thought, well, that's very, you know, that's something just like that stuck out amongst all the other things. And it just stood there and just kind of looked at me, and I genuinely got afraid. And I went down to the other end. And I'm like, I don't know if these people are real or not, you know, but I'm going to go down here with them. And this thing come walking toward us, and it gets in the tub, and it starts walking toward me. And I literally didn't know if it was going to kill me, or I was like, why is it coming at me? Because it was powerful enough that it looked like it could have easily done that. And I'm not a small guy, you know, and it leaned over, and I just remember like looking up at it as it was leaning over, and I thought, man, this might be it. You know, this might be the time they're not bringing me back, and maybe they're mad at me about something, or all these thoughts are going through your head. And it slowly like takes its hand, and the tip of it had long fingers like the gray, but the tip of its finger was like flat, like angled weird and kind of like flat. And it leans over, and it actually touches me right in the middle, you know, the symbolic third eye. Of course, you know, the pineal gland's actually further back, but the symbolic third eye, and it just leaned over and it touches me like right there, and I blacked out. And that's all I remember of the incident. But, you know, that was the time that I saw something that the only way I could explain it was the most unusual hybrid that I had ever come across.
Can you mention briefly, I think you mentioned a few minutes back about your psychic abilities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I found this time and time again with experiencers. And in my particular case, you know, I've got a precognitive stuff that happens, clairaudient, you know, where that's how I got into spirit communication, because of my entire childhood. I had like all this paranormal activity happening around me constantly. And so I was scared so often because I didn't know, you know, what was happening. And now I found out that that's common, even with Betty and Barney Hill. Like Kathleen, it's their niece, you know, she had mentioned that they had some strange paranormal activity happening after their incident that happened. So I found this to be, I guess what happens, I guess, you know, you sort of become like a spirit magnet, a ghost magnet, you know, like, and I believe that my theory is because we're taken through these dimensional portals. I didn't know for years, like, how they did it. And then I had an incident where they actually woke me up on purpose. They were lined up down my bed, and my bedroom wall was not there anymore. And it was replaced by this oval shaped, and this white misty stuff was around it, and I could see through it into a craft. And then now I understand, like, what people say, well, I was floated through the ceiling, or I was floated through the window or the wall or whatever. Well, in essence, they didn't exist anymore. And it was, there was these dimensional portals that are open up. They're taking us instantaneous. I tried to scream out the word no, and I was unable to verbalize. And in the time, one syllable word, I was inside the craft in an instant. And then they let me speak and it came out. So it was like that fast that it happened. But now that I look back at it, I realized that they were, once again, they knew, like, wow, he wonders like how this happens. And so they showed me. But I believe by going through these dimensional portals that it actually increases our vibration rate. And we start vibrating closer to the spirit world, which in my research and stuff, I believe that they're vibrating at a faster rate than we are. And so, we become like beacons to those that on the other side that are either lost or need some kind of a message delivered or something to that effect, unfinished business before they can move on, things to that effect. And so many, not only myself, but so many others that I've interviewed, same type of thing over and over and over again. I see this, and I just think it has something to do with the change that happens to us. It either opens up our pineal gland more so that we can, we're heightened psychic awareness, or the vibration rate, or both.
Okay. We're running out of time, but it's been fascinating, all the information that you provided us. For those who are probably listening to our broadcast or might watch the video later on, for those who are afraid to speak out about this kind of abduction experiences, what would you recommend to those people that have gone or currently going through this abduction experience? What would be your advice for them?
The number one thing is to talk to somebody. There's always somebody that will listen. Don't hold it in. I can tell you from experience, I did that for over 20 years. I call it suffering in silence, because it's not as taboo as it used to be. Things are changing. I'm out there trying to spread more awareness about this, and showing that the skeptics, they can't come at me with a lot, because I've proven myself over and over with all this technology now. They always say, hey, scientific data. Well, I did that now. And so there's always, you have to talk about it, get it off your chest, what you remember. The other thing is, if you only remember, if you just maybe slightly suspect and you only remember one thing or two things, just remember that if you're functioning normally and it's not really affecting you, like I ended up with like depression, high anxiety. I became agoraphobic. I mean, it was really, really bad. And I had been an athlete when I was younger. I was a musician at the time, not somebody that's prone to anxiety attacks, panic attacks. But if it gets to that level, you got to do something about it, because all these memories are going to surface physically, and you've got to do something about it. There's getting to be more and more online groups where you can share stuff with. I recommend that. But if you can, more and more therapists are kind of coming on board, especially, that do regression and things like that. So you just have to do your research. Sometimes it can just be a friend, but if you just talk about it and go from that, that's the thing right there is the number one thing I'd recommend. And then just remember that if you do start breaking open into these memories, there's no turning back.
Okay.
I think that we're running out of time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to say thank you to Bret Oldham. Like always, I've been seeing you for years, and like I said, I consider you my friend. And if anybody wants to contact you, how can they get to contact you?
Well, I actually took my website down a couple years ago because it just got out of control. Usually people try to find me on Facebook and message me that way. That's probably the easiest way to do it at this point.
Okay. I just want to say too, and I'm going to say this in Spanish if you don't mind. Acuérdense de suscribirse a Paraterrestre. Necesitamos sus suscripciones para continuar en el programa y traer personas como esta. Aquí no estamos trayendo cuestiones de cuestiones que nos estamos imaginando. Estamos trayendo pruebas, estamos trayendo personas como Bret Oldham, que ha sido, como él lo acaba de decir, científicamente estudiado, y todas las cosas que se le han puesto, pues él las ha pasado. También estamos buscando en Puerto Rico personas que quieran hacer investigación sobre esto. Se pueden contactar con el canal de Paraterrestre, o yo dejé el número mío en el canal. Se pueden contactar conmigo a través del celular. Thank you again, Bret.
Thank you. And I
Carlos,
want to say something, that my thoughts and prayers are with all you people down in Puerto Rico, and I hope things continue to get better for you.
Thank you.
excellent, thank
We
you.
appreciate that. Thank you.
So if we don't have anything else to say, Pablo, have a good night. Carlos, have a good night. Bret, like always, have a good night, and we would like to invite you to speak to us again.
Sure.
We will be contacting you
right.
to set another time to talk deeper and wider about your experiences.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Amigos, muchas gracias por sintonizarnos. Si les gustó el pasado video, le pedimos por favor que se suscriban a nuestro canal Paraterrestre en YouTube, pulsando el botón de suscribirse. Así usted recibirá de primera mano los mejores videos y la mejor información respecto a estos temas de la conciencia, el misterio y otros temas de interés para ustedes. También le pueden dar clic al botón del icono de la campana para que usted reciba notificaciones de nuestros nuevos videos.